And now, the Lowe Post.
Welcome to the Lowe Post podcast. It's bright and very early on the West Coast. Free agency is underway. Paul George is a Sixer. Chris Paul is a Spur. Klay Thompson is not a Warrior. There's lots of other stuff going on. Oklahoma City just made a couple very interesting small deals for Isaiah Joe and Aaron Wiggins that could portend more stuff happening. Bobby Marks, it's been a whirlwind, my friend. How are you?
I'm good. I've never experienced two words that have scared so many billionaires. You know what those two words are, my friend?
Second apron?
Second apron. The two teams that have spent $950 million the last 4 years in luxury tax penalties have certainly put the checkbook away for different reasons, and certainly understandable. And I would say the new CBA has made things quite interesting here.
You know who's very happy about the Clippers 3 times in one of the most bizarre press releases I can ever remember any team releasing, saying goodbye to a player before he had signed anywhere, in Paul George, referencing in that release 3 times the new CBA, aka the second apron. Who's really happy about that is the Kroenke family, who gets to say, hey, we lost Bruce Brown last year. We lost Kentavious Caldwell-Pope this year, but we're not cheap. See, the super duper rich guy over here, I know we own like 17 sports teams, but the super duper rich guy over here is also complaining about the second apron. And Christian Brown, I don't know if you guys saw Christian Brown, like he's can't shoot like KCP, but he's ready. And we got Julian Strawther ready to take his minutes. Everything's cool. Like Nikola Jokic is in his prime. We think he might not even realize this is going on. Like we might be safe from the wrath of Nikola Jokic. He might be riding some horses and drinking some beer in Serbia. He may not even know this is happening. Nobody tell him. Nobody tell him we did this again, because it's apron time. I'm gonna buy an apron for my backyard barbecue.
You know what would be funny? I'm surprised, and I'm actually saying it serious. I'm surprised, like Lowe's, or I should get or I'm gonna have to get my agent a sponsorship with Lowe's or like Home Depot, right? Like
Lowe's is a natural for this guy right here. I mean, it's my family company. I do this I just do this for the kicks. I'm the heir to the
breaking news.
We got breaking news. Let's start with breaking news right now.
We got breaking news. Isaiah Hartenstein, 3 years, $87 million to the Oklahoma City Thunder.
Okay. I don't want to start with Isaiah Hartenstein because it's not the biggest story of free agency, but Isaiah Hartenstein to the Thunder, 3 years, $87 million. I believe that creates 1 year, 26-27, when Hartenstein will be on the books with Jalen Williams' new deal and Chet Holmgren's new deal, and obviously Shai Gilgeous-Alexander already on a max. So that's a 1 year window where they're going to have a lot of high salaries, correct?
I would say, yes, I agree with that. I would say I wouldn't be surprised if there's some type of team option in there.
Could be. So let's just do Hartenstein quickly, and then we'll come back to it.
Yeah.
I said yesterday on NBA Today, the entire Western Conference was praying that Oklahoma City would strike out using its cap space, because they got Caruso for Giddey. That's a short-term upgrade. They just re-signed Isaiah Joe, 4 years, $48 million. Aaron Wiggins, 5 years, $47 million. Unbelievable deals. I don't know how they do it. Unbelievable contracts for both of them. And then they had this cap space left over, and they use it on Hartenstein, who will usurp the Jalen Williams role as backup center, will presumably play a decent amount with Chet Holmgren, which can work because of Chet's versatility on both ends of the floor, and Hartenstein's passing. His passing on the roll will add another layer to the Thunder. And like the Thunder very quickly in a week have transitioned from, okay, the playoffs are a laboratory. We got to wait and see how we look, what we learn about ourselves. Okay, we learned that Josh Giddey doesn't really fit with this team, into we're going full bore for the NBA championship in 2024-25. We'll have to see how all of this shakes out, who signs where and what. But I mean, you'd have to consider them the favorites for the number 1 seed again, if not the flat out favorites to come out of the Western Conference with another year of seasoning for these guys. But we have to start with Paul George.
Yeah.
Paul George signs the max, 4 years, 200 and whatever million with the Philadelphia 76ers. The Sixers this morning re-signed Tyrese Maxey on the much anticipated 5-year max extension. They have re-signed Kelly Oubre into their room exception. They have Andre Drummond on board as a great backup to Joel Embiid, a movie we've seen before. Eric Gordon probably is going to have a hug on the airport tarmac with Daryl Morey today, because Daryl Morey just can't resist getting his old Rockets buddies back together. Maybe Trevor Ariza is available. I don't know. The Sixers are loading up. The top of the East is going to be an absolute slugfest. The Celtics have raised the bar, and the Sixers are trying to come up with them. The Knicks are trying to come up with them. But that, by the way, that's the other subplot to Hartenstein that we should talk about, is the Knicks backup, is the Knicks center situation.
Yeah.
And I don't want to belabor it now because it's early in free agency and there's stuff to do. But if I'm the Cleveland Cavaliers and I haven't signed Mitchell to an extension yet, maybe that comes, maybe it doesn't. I'm like, oh boy, everyone above me just got really good. The Amtrak corridor on fire. Team Lowe loves it when the Amtrak corridor is on fire. If I'm the Heat and I have this Butler going into the last year of his contract situation looming over my head, I'm like, ooh. I mean, I know we're the Heat and we just like find a way sometimes. And yeah, we won game 2 against the Celtics and Jimmy Butler gave a boisterous sideline interview that didn't work out for him. And we said, we're going to go up 2-1, blah, blah. I don't want to hear about the Celtics. And then a team that has barely been talked about, the Milwaukee Bucks, like just watching everyone around them load up, and they got nothing going on. I shouldn't say they got nothing going on. They seem to just be counting on, well, it'll just be year 2 of these 3 dudes together with the coach that came in halfway through a chaotic season. We'll be good. But I want to start with Paul George. You want to talk Sixers first or Clippers first?
Let's talk Clippers first.
So so obviously, Bobby, everybody knows the trade. And the trade is already today, as people are dunking on the Clippers, being framed as Paul George for SGA, Gallinari, and 17 million picks, one of whom became Jalen Williams, by the way, the good Jalen Williams, another of whom became Jaime Jaquez Jr. But we all knew at the time, and we know now, that was a trade for both Kawhi Leonard and Paul George, effectively. 5 years together, it's an unmitigated failure. There's no way around it. They did not succeed. The bar for success is higher than the first Western Conference Finals appearance in franchise history. This team in 5 seasons won 3 playoff series. If you had told me on that morning in July, when the literal earthquake struck Las Vegas, or the Southern California, Las Vegas area, and Paul George and Kawhi went together to the Clippers, that they would win 3 playoff series in 5 years, I would have said, that's a cataclysm. There's no way that that's true. They have not won a playoff series since 2021. I would like to repeat that. The LA Clippers, paying all the luxury tax you just mentioned, have not won a playoff series with Paul George and Kawhi Leonard since 2021. Kawhi Leonard has not finished the season healthy since the bubble in Orlando, where they choked against the Nuggets and gave up a 3-1 lead. It's a failure. There's no way around it. Here's what I'm confused about, Bobby, and here's what has not been.
I know where you're going because we've texted about this. I know where you're going.
So the Clippers in that bizarro press release and in previous messaging mentioned the second apron. Like, we're just terrified of second apron. Second apron is so scary. Like, we can't just mess with the second apron.
Mm-hmm.
So all the reporting by Woj and others, and I've heard the same, is that the issue with Paul George was the 4th year, right? Like, they were willing to offer a 3-year close to max, not a 4-year max. I don't understand how that haggling over the 4th year and the second apron rationalization match up. Because if you're willing to pay Paul George for 3 years and you're willing to pay James Harden for 2 years at $70 million, which is frankly a bigger number than I thought James Harden would get, a little bit bigger. Like, it's not like they offered Paul George nothing. They offered him 3 years, approximately $50 million a pop. By doing all of those things together, you are by definition for sure going into the second apron in 24-25, probably going into the second apron, or at least the first apron in 25-26, maybe going into the second apron in 26-27, maybe not. And then Paul George's 4th year comes, Kawhi's off the books in theory, Harden's off the books in theory. Like, the second apron rationalization does not quite hold up to me, because if you're offering Paul George 3 years, you are willing to go into the second apron. And so I just kind of don't understand why they drew this line in the sand for the 4th year. I understand that Paul George will be 38. I understand that contract probably will be bad in the fourth year. I understand that you want to give yourselves maximum flexibility and wiggle room to sort of reorient your team post Kawhi Leonard and give yourself access to more tools. Now they use one such tool on Derek Jones Jr., who they swiped away from the Mavs for 3 years, $30 million. Mavs replace him effectively with Najee Marshall. We could talk about that if you want. I think that's kind of a wash. Najee does some things better than Derek Jones Jr., doesn't have the vertical threat and kind of ability to skitter around with guards, maybe on the perimeter, the quickest guards that Derek Jones Jr. has, but whatever. It just, something is missing to me in why the Clippers drew this line in the sand where they drew it, because now, Bobby, like what are you? Like, they'll do something else in free agency, but now they're going into this new arena with Kawhi, no Paul George, with Harden, no Paul George. Like, I don't even know where this team will stack up in the Western Conference. It might be a play-in team at best. And to me, Bobby, all of this suggests to me, I'm just putting pieces together. I'm not really sure like how much they wanted to run this team back. And what it feels like to me is, because the second apron rationalization doesn't quite match up with the year 4 back and forth, this feels like to me an act of surrender, an admission of failure, an admission that this team was over and could not win big again. And that's where I think the timing is interesting. So they extended Kawhi for 3 years, 153. I looked it up today. It was January 10th.
Yeah.
2024. The Clippers
you know why I know that? Because his date when he can be traded.
the Clippers were 24-13 in the middle of a 16-3 rampage after the Harden adjustment period. I bet they would have loved to have signed Kawhi then, when they were exuberant about, we've got it. Like, this is the team. We've got it. Paul George. I bet they would have loved to have signed Paul George then. I meant to say. They don't. They can't come to an agreement. Flash forward to the end of the season. Kawhi gets hurt again. They lose in the first round again. They can't recapture that 16-3 form after the All-Star break. They're kind of a 500-ish team after the All-Star break, and it feels over. And I think this is an admission of, like, it's done. And I get that the second apron probably was in play and they get under it now. Like, that's great. They get under it now. They wouldn't have gotten under it now if they re-signed Paul George for 3 years, which they were willing to do. I just kind of don't get it. Something is missing to me.
Yeah, there is. I mean, like, they were going to be over $200 million this year. They were going to probably be in the apron next year here. Certainly, where you, as you mentioned, year 4, basically Paul would have been the only guy on the roster, right? He would have been making $61 million, and I get $61 million for a 37-year-old is a lot of money. But 4 years from now, that cap, which is at 141, will be, I don't know, 190, somewhere around there. I mean, this thing's growing. I mean, you saw it's going to go from 141 to 155 and for next year here. So that's where it almost feels like a more expensive version of kind of what Golden State just went through with Klay. Like, we just kind of, here's what we can offer, but I don't know if we really want you. But we're going to make you an offer, and we'll talk about Golden State and Klay as far as the semantics there. So I would have, I mean, listen, I'm not in their front office. I would have given him the 4th year. I would have too. And I would have bit the bullet. And I would have just dealt with it. I would have just dealt with, like, listen, we can debate about, is he a max player? I always say the max players are determined by the circumstances. The market dictates sometimes when you are a max player, and you had a team like Philadelphia, who was basically sitting there with we all knew all this money and who the guy was going to be. I never remember a situation where a marquee free agent had, I guess, with 3, I don't want to say visits or what meetings and stuff like that. And 2 of the teams were eliminated before he even got to meet with Philadelphia. I mean, Oklahoma City was off. I mean, Orlando was off the board before everything started with KCP, and then the Clips put out that press release. So I don't understand. And I know, like, they've said it in their press conferences. They've talked about the apron. They've talked about everything. I would understand it if this was like year 4 of the apron. They've been in it forever, right? Like, this is a new thing. And I talked to a general manager, and I was teasing because I said the same line to him, what we said as far as the 2 words. And he's like, yeah, I get it, but there's ways to work around it. Right? Like, there's ways to work around the second apron. Like, it hurts you if you don't have your draft picks and you're extremely, extremely top heavy in salary, right? That's where it really hurts you. It hurts Phoenix. It hurts Milwaukee. Some of those teams. It doesn't hurt Minnesota. Minnesota went in and basically got the 8th pick in a draft. And it wouldn't have hurt the Clips because Kawhi would have come off was off. I mean, Harden had a player option. Who knows where his contract would have gone if Paul would have gone. And there's no more salary on their books. Now they're walking into a brand new building. All right, put the building aside here. Into the Western Conference, stripped of draft equity because of the Harden trade. Remember, they owe picks still, swaps, unprotected.
Well,
all
this
that
is
stuff.
why it's a disaster. Not a disaster. This is why they're up a creek a little bit, because we know they still owe debts to the Thunder from the original trade. They now owe debts to the Sixers. The Sixers own their pick in 28 and they own a swap with them in 29. So they can't, like, initially my brain for a second thought, are they just going to turn around and trade Kawhi, who is in Costa Rica apparently and may not know that any of this is going on? But they can't, because they don't. I mean, they could if they just were like, whatever, it's over, but they can't. And the Sixers not only get Paul George from them, they own their draft equity in those years.
Yeah, and listen, I understand, and I'm sure more will come out, like the rationale of not wanting to maybe take back contracts in a trade, an opt-in and trade. Certainly it's been reported with Golden State, and I get that route. I get like hypothetically, it didn't make sense for Chris Paul and Looney and I don't, like Kuminga, we're going to hear about his name being available and stuff like that. Wasn't the case.
I'm skeptical. So
I am extremely skeptical on that.
So let's do that now.
Yep.
So Golden State has this Chris Paul contract that they end up just waiving to get out of. They had a deadline to guarantee it for $30 million. They're trying, in conjunction with Chris Paul, to find a trade where he could make his money. They use his salary along with some other stuff to get an impact player to put around Curry and Green and the young guys, whatever young guys are left over. They zero in on Paul George because they see this going south for the Clippers. What people need to understand is this is a triangular situation. There's 3 sides in these discussions. There's the Clippers, there's Paul George, and there's the Warriors. And what Paul George might want the Clippers to give up, or to accept rather, in a opt-in and trade from the Warriors might be much less than what the Clippers, Lawrence Frank, Steve Ballmer, are willing to accept in an opt-in and trade with the Warriors. Paul George just wants to get to the Warriors in that scenario, and he wants to have the best young players on their team still on their team when he gets there. The Clippers are not concerned with that. The Clippers are trying to get the best return possible, both in talent and in financial wiggle room terms. And that's why, I don't get the sense that, although there was a lot of discussion around this, I just think all of those bridges were just too far apart. I don't necessarily think that ever got close, because this isn't a two entity negotiation. It's at least a 3, and maybe if you include Chris, kind of a 3.5 entity negotiation. So the Warriors end up waiving Chris. They're going to lose Klay Thompson, which is an end of an era we're going to talk about. But that and that was maybe I didn't hear about much more of an opt-in and trade scenario for Paul George anywhere. And so then it comes down to, like you said, take the meetings and go.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. I mean, from the Clippers' perspective, just going back to Golden State, the 3 guys you would have gotten in the trade, if Kuminga's not, you would have been in the apron. You would have been basically in a, you would have had no flexibility with 3 guys you probably didn't want.
And then if you're the Warriors, you have to ask yourselves, okay, we have Paul George, Draymond Green, Steph Curry, some of our young guys who are semi-proven to Moses Moody, kind of still proving himself. I like Moses Moody, but he's been in another rotation. Whoever's left, no Klay. Is that actually, can we really compete at the highest level with that? Maybe not.
No, I mean, I totally get it. I mean, where Golden State is right now, as you said, they waived Chris Paul. They're going to lose Klay Thompson. They'll probably create some type of trade exception and some type of sign and trade here. You've got your 12-8 non-tax mid-level exception to I mean, try to get would DeMar DeRozan go there on a non-tax, like, those are the guys that you're probably staring down.
On the apron. So
Yeah.
it's going to become a talking point now because the most hardline skeptical fans are going to say that teams like the Nuggets and the Clippers and the Warriors are using the apron as an excuse to be cheap, are using an
Yeah.
apron as cover for their refusal to pay the luxury tax, the repeater tax, which gets even more harsh. And I think, particularly if I'm a Nuggets fan, I am frustrated that Bruce Brown, Jeff Green, and now KCP have gone out the door for essentially nothing in return for 2 straight summers. I think there is an element of frugality there. But I do think this is a real thing. It's not just cover for cheapness.
Mhm.
It's you are in jail transaction wise. Like, I'm not sure that people really understand. Your pick gets frozen, then it gets dropped to last in the first round. If
Yeah.
you're in the apron, second apron, 2 years in a row or something like that, it gets,
Like
you have to
two out of
come,
four. It's like this year and then 2 out of 4,
you got
it's
to come
basically
out of
3.
it to
Yeah.
get that pick back to where it is.
Yep.
It's so hard to make trades. That's like,
Yeah.
you have to go dollar for you cannot take in a dollar more. You can't aggregate. Like, you're just kind of in jail. And as more of the league approaches jail, you have fewer options in terms of this isn't there is probably some CYA going on here for owners who would just prefer not to spend hugely into the repeater tax. Steve Ballmer just found the repeater tax payment like in a pocket of a pair of pants he hasn't worn in 30 years. I think the Clippers are more concerned about, like, we have to be able to pivot a little bit. I think there's legitimacy to that, but it just doesn't line up with why is the 4th year where you draw the line to this? We have more breaking news.
We do.
Tobias Harris, 2 years, $52 million to the Pistons. You know what, Bobby? No, we're not talking about that. Just why? Here's my full analysis of that deal. Why?
Yeah. I mean, I hope the second year is a team option. That's what I hope.
Why? He can shoot at least. No one
Yeah.
else on the team can shoot. He can shoot. Why? Okay, back to Paul George.
Yeah.
What other I mean, I don't know where the Clippers go from here in terms of the short term. They have, like, why is James Harden on the team? Why are you paying James Harden $35 million to be on this team?
Yeah, I mean, that's the big thing as far as you knew you were going to lose him, and you stayed with Harden and you gave him a 2-year $70 million deal with a player option. I would have understood if Paul was still here and that you're giving him 3 years, 90 and a player option. Like, I get it. Like, for that, like, you could have easily just kind of pivoted away from that, and really had some nice flexibility here. And then who knows, who knows what you do with Kawhi, and then maybe you do a reboot, right? Maybe you kind of just reboot this whole thing
Without your picks?
without your picks. They're basically where Brooklyn was, right? I mean, like, before they got their picks back.
So here's the upside scenario for the Clippers. And, like, I could see this playing out. Derek Jones Jr., he's like frisky. Our defense is pretty good. Like, I could see it playing out like the first year without Chris Paul, where they're punching above their weight a little bit. They have this fun team. Kawhi is still Kawhi, all NBA player. Ty Lue's a creative coach. Derek Jones Jr. works out. They get another free agent that comes in. Harden's balling out. And they're 25-21 or 25-20. And it's like, hey, look, like, they're still pretty good. They're frisky. They're fun to watch. They're competitive in the Western Conference. Maybe they're even 25-17. And they've really rebounded without Paul George. They've filled in all the gaps here and there. The problem is then Kawhi gets hurt and is out for 20 games or 25 games or out in the playoffs. And then you're just like, well, now we're just completely, because Paul's gone and, like, we're counting on James Harden to win games by himself as a star player. Your margin for anything going wrong is pretty much nil. Now we'll see if they get a DeRozan or whatever that could help. I just don't see, like, what this team is in the Western Conference in the next 2 or 3 years. And they obviously are okay with being, I mean, Oklahoma City, Minnesota, Denver, Dallas, Phoenix, who have Lakers are still around, who I'm sure I'm forgetting 5 other good teams. New Orleans, who made a trade this week for Dejounte Murray. Like, I don't know. Like, what are the Clippers going to finish? 7th, 9th, 10th? Like, I don't know. Like, I don't. If Kawhi gets hurt, they're going into the lottery without control of their pick.
And you got two surly veterans on your roster that you're trying to get rid of, Russell Westbrook and PJ Tucker. I mean, when Westbrook opted in, like, I mean, I think if you're the Clippers front office, that's probably the one thing you didn't want.
They
I
might
mean,
waive him. They might have
yeah,
to waive him. I don't really get Denver's reported interest in him. I mean, I guess they just need a backup point guard. Russ was. I looked up his playoff stats because that was the deal breaker for the Clippers. Like, this guy came, he played his role, good soldier, rebounding menace. I think rebounding is like the last strength left in Russ's game. Gets into the playoffs and is just on tilt the entire series. He shot 13 of 50. 13 of 50 overall in the series with 11 turnovers and 10 assists, I think. And every play he made, the Dallas Mavericks coaching staff, because I was hanging out with a lot of Mavericks people during the finals, talking about many, many things. One of which was like, can you guys just keep Russ in the game the whole game? Because we're loving everything that he's doing. I don't really get the Denver thing. If I'm a Nuggets fan, I'm like, what exactly is going on? We have the best player in the world, and we just can't find a way to retain anybody at any cost. And we're getting Russell Westbrook maybe coming in here. Anyway, Clippers. Should we turn to the Sixers now? What else have we not talked about Clippers? I mean, obviously, this is the end of an era. It didn't work.
yeah.
It was worth
Listen,
a shot. It was worth a shot.
Listen, when I remember
You
when
do
I
that
remember
trade every
yeah,
time. Every time.
when they did the deal in 2009, I mean, it was basically almost like this. Ironically, it's like the same, almost like the same time when the Paul George news broke last night. It was like 3 o'clock in the morning here. When they did the deal, you know, it was hard to complain about it because they got Kawhi Leonard with it, right? Like everyone says it was, you know, now people will say it was Paul George and what they gave up, but no, it was a package deal
They got the
because
finals MVP and
yep,
a guy who I believe Paul George finished third in MVP that season in 2018, 2019 with Oklahoma City before
yeah,
Damian Lillard waved goodbye to them, waved goodbye to everybody right out of the playoffs.
yeah. So I mean, now you still live with the consequences because of what you owe Oklahoma City there. But I mean, that's a problem for another day. But in Philadelphia now, you know, gets Paul George on that 4-year, $212 million contract.
So Philly obviously just aced the offseason. And
Yeah.
you could sit here and tell me that they would have been better off signing KCP plus Bruce Brown somehow, plus whatever. Maybe. But I think Daryl Morey has never operated like that. He wants stars. Paul George is 34 years old. He's not the same level defender he used to be, but he's an absolute A+ fit around Tyrese Maxey and Joel Embiid on the wing. We just went through the litany of the Oubres, Drummonds, Gordons. There will be more coming. They could even have what kind of bird rights possibilities do they have with their own free agents? They had to renounce all of them, right? So they don't have any.
Yeah. So you'll get Oubre on the room exception. You'll get Drummond into some cap space. Maxey, you know, sign or agreed with that deal. That was. I mean, I give Tyrese Maxey a lot of credit. I know. I mean, I know he just got rewarded for $204 million, but by him waiting with his cap hold, they were able to go out and do all this. I think the interesting thing is they still got a little bit of room left. If they waive Paul Reed, they can get like another $9 to $10 million guy. You could also maybe guarantee Paul Reed's contract and go out and make a trade with some of the draft picks you have, and maybe you could put a minimum guy in there. You still have KJ Martin if you want to. You can maybe keep his cap hold on and use him in a sign and trade here. So there's still some flexibility as far as on how they add to the roster.
I love the fit is what it is. And like this team, if they're healthy, and obviously like Joel Embiid never is healthy in the playoffs. Paul George has had health issues here and there and is only getting older. So that's a big if. It's a big if. But this is a team that's worth a shot. This is a team that's worth a big investment. This is a team that at its ceiling, in top 3 talent, can match Boston, can exceed the Knicks in like, if we're just ranking 1, 2, 3, if they're healthy. And a couple of things need to happen here. Number one, Joel Embiid needs to just acquiesce to whatever plan the Sixers medical team has to get him healthy in the playoffs, because they just can't play this game over and over again. And he's had repeated knee injuries now to the same knee. Whatever that is, it's above my pay grade. I'm not a doctor. It's like the MVP chase, all that stuff. It's over. Like, you just got to be healthy in the playoffs. Forget the 65 game rule. Who cares? Number two, it's put up or shut up time for Joel Embiid in the playoffs. Like, it's been a little under discussed because of the injuries, and that's fair. Like, he's had fluky injuries, he's had recurring injuries, and you can't play that well if you're not healthy. But we were having, like, he has not been good enough in the playoffs. And not only that, it's kind of been forgotten because it was in the first round. A lot of stuff happened since. Celtics won the title. This free agency stuff is, draft, Bronny, all of it. There were a couple of games against the Knicks, including the game 6, where he did not look like he wanted the ball late in games, where he was kind of playing hot potato with the ball late in games. And I don't think he got nearly enough for it, like, that he would have gotten if he had been healthy, that he would have gotten, like, if LeBron James had done that in 2010, 2011, the whole world would have just melted down. And it wasn't egregious. Like, he still took some shots. He still made some baskets, but he did not look like he wanted to assert control of the team. And his playoff performance has declined from his regular season performance more than you would even expect. Paul George has had a wildly up and down playoff career. It starts off with, like, epic showdowns against LeBron, where he dunks on Birdman and LeBron gives him like a high five at center court, which is like, you made it. You're a made man in the NBA. He coins himself playoff P, then has a 2-for-16 elimination game stinker at Utah in his first year with the Thunder. People don't remember, but he was 14 of 20 from the floor, played quite well in the Damian Lillard wave goodbye game the next year. I would say in 2 of his 3 postseasons with the Clippers, he just was not. It's amazing that there were only 3. 2020 bubble, he was awful. That's when people started making fun of him. Way off P, pandemic P, podcast P, Philadelphia P, cheesesteak P. And then last season, he averaged 19 points a game when they really, really needed him. Shot 41% from the field and was just kind of okay. For his career, his playoff averages are 21 points, 7 rebounds, 4 assists on 42% shooting, 35% on threes, 47% on twos. Like, overall, it's just okay. Like, it's Kevin Pelton wrote about this once. It's the playoffs are harder, and Paul George's overall dossier has highs. It's got lows. It's got mediocrities. It's probably like a little bit below what you would expect based on his regular season performance, but not egregiously so. Like, if we can't get to the playoffs next year and it's like Tyrese Maxey as the young, confident guy running the show and everyone else is a little jittery and off, like, it's put up or shut up time for these guys because they have a shot. Like, this big 3 fits perfectly. They're going to round out the roster around it. It's great work from Daryl Morey to trade Harden for the Clippers picks, resist any temptation. And I hit him for this, and he's proven me wrong. He did nothing at the trade deadline last year, really, like nothing in terms of bringing in real players who are going to help your team. Didn't trade any of the assets he got in the Harden trade, despite talking about them a lot, in part to preserve this cap space. And I think in part, in almost a bizarre way, caught a little bit of a break with Embiid getting hurt because it allowed the Sixers to be like, well, we don't really know what state he's going to be in the playoffs. We can be conservative. It's like, why would we go all in at the trade deadline? They don't. They preserve their cap space. They get Paul George. I don't see really any downside. I mean, the downside is the 4th year of the deal. Who freaking cares? Joel Embiid is 30 years old. He's hurt every year. Like, you have to go for it as long as you have him on your team, and they're going for it.
Well, yeah, I mean, listen, you mentioned it before. It would have been easy just to split up the money into 2 players, right? But Daryl does not operate that. It's like, give me the 3 best players. Let me worry about putting depth around them. And that's how he, whether it be in Houston when they had James Harden, then he goes and does the Chris Paul signing trade. I think that was 2016 when Chris was in with the Clippers here. But that's, that for him feels like he's got a better chance than basically 2 main guys and basically, 10 role players here. And I think you saw certainly in the Knicks series here. And you're going to get some of these guys back. You're going to get, Oubre back. You get Eric Gordon, you get Andre Drummond, which is a nice backup, who had a pretty good year in Chicago there. And we're going to see what else he can add.
I think PG, like I've always been a big PG guy. I love PG. He's had some bad moments. There's no question about it. He is a very malleable player who fits anywhere. He is a little bit miscast as a number one option. He's a guy who can be your second option, sometimes morph into your first option. Like if you look at his pick and roll numbers and his isolation numbers for his career, which I did, he averages about 17 to 20 pick and rolls per 100 possessions in his career with like decent efficiency. That's like medium volume for a player, low for a player of his stature. Same with his isolations. It's low to medium for a player of his stature with okay efficiency. He can do it, but he's best when he sort of blends in as a floating second option who can snap into being a first option, who can sometimes be a spot up option and focus on defense, which, by the way, complained on his podcast about we lost all the guys who did the dirty work for the Clippers. You just signed up to do some dirty work, my friend. You're getting paid $50 million a year to be the best wing defender on the team. You got Tyrese Maxey, who has all the guts in the world, who wants every big shot in the world. You have the MVP from 2 years ago, averaged more points per minute, more than a point per minute last year. You got to do the dirty work. But I think this is a perfect kind of place for him. He's going to be the third option offensively, but can take over possessions here and there when they need him to. They can play, they always have to throw these kitchen sink lineups out there. I call them when Embiid is on the bench, where they just have to play everybody else who's good to sustain without Embiid. He can help those lineups. Drummond's a great backup for him. Look, Boston is the bar.
Yeah.
Boston is still the bar.
Yep.
They bring back everybody relevant, including first free agency deal of the year, Luke Cornett. Back.
He even got a graphic for it. We even did a Luke Cornett graphic,
Was he doing this? Was he doing the Cornett contest?
We put him in a depth chart.
If the graphic should have been Luke Cornett doing the Cornett contest where he's raising his hand and then there's two bags of money one above each of his hands and he's grabbing the money. They're the bar. They're entering his favorites next year. I don't want to hear any argument about it. But New York and Philly have put themselves in position to make a real push against them, which is why I keep looking at Milwaukee. Like, I don't know what your options are. I know you don't really got many options, but
here's the thing with Milwaukee too, is the two guys they got in the draft, AJ Johnson and Tyler Smith. Those are guys like 2 years from now. They're not, like Ryan Dunn in Phoenix. They're the big wing. Like he can come in and play right now. AJ Johnson played like 8 minutes in Australia last year. Tyler Smith was within the G League. So those are more like, for a team that's win now, those are basically like post Lillard guys.
I'm sure Bucks fans were thrilled to hear that little. But I mean, like I said last week, I have this nagging Bucks pessimism that if you wanted to be an optimist, you would say, hey, Zach, why are you so pessimistic? They still have Dame, Chris, and Giannis. When those three guys are on the floor, they were plus 15 per 100 possessions. Dame and Giannis have now a full camp season to hone their pick and roll chemistry, which is like dicey and up and down. The coaching chaos is over. Doc Rivers is now the coach. He gets to install the staff. He gets to install a system. Like another year of seasoning, they're going to be fine. I look around and I'm like, okay, well, A, they're a year older, all of them. And Middleton is dealing with injuries off and on constantly. B, they did not healthy, fully Doc Rivers, Adrian Griffin, whatever. They did not put together like 10 days of solid, consistent, elite basketball at any point in the entire season last year. I understand Giannis was hurt in the playoffs. They're dead on arrival without him. They fought the Pacers actually pretty well, all things considered. Dame missed 2 games in that series. Nice showing. Chris Middleton looked great in the playoffs. They just there was never a week where like, oh, they figured it out. They look great. Awesome. Like, can I see it for a week or two before I'm like, well, all they need is seasoning? And now there's this noise about Brook Lopez. I don't know what the hell is going on with Brook Lopez, but if you trade Brook Lopez, I understand he's older. He's on an expiring contract. You had to do something to shake up your team. If you trade him, like, how are you building a defensive architecture with this team? Their entire defensive architecture for 5 years has been Brook at the rim and Giannis being everywhere. If Brook is not at the rim and it's like some whatever center at the rim, I don't know, man. If I'm a Bucks fan, I'm like, oh my God, what the hell just happened? Philly got who? New York did what? Boston is unbelievable. What happened to us? Perk said we had the big NBA Today special yesterday, and we were talking about the potential of Paul George going to Philly, and Perk said, man, I would go to Philly if I were Paul George. It's the East. East is so much easier than the West. In the East, all you got to worry about is New York and Boston. And the discussion just went on. It just went like nobody. And then I brought it back. I was like, Perk, remember the Bucks? Like they're just out. They're just out of the ether right now.
Yeah, I mean, and when you look at it, and we said it last year, like Middleton is always the X factor here, and I don't know where his health is going to be going into this year. And it's almost like they are, I guess, I don't want to call them like kind of the junior version of where Phoenix is, supersized, with basically like a limited way to figure it out.
The parallel is irresistible. 2021 finalists, and it's like, wait a second, we loaded up, but as each of our conferences like passed us by.
Yeah. Yeah, and we're basically stuck on minimum guys. I mean, that's what Milwaukee's going to have to do.
I don't know what you're talking about with Phoenix, man. Talking about with them, everything's going great with them. 0 playoff wins, but every GM would trade places with them.
26 out of 30.
What have they done so far, Phoenix?
They got Bobo. Mason Plumlee. I like the Plumlee signing.
Yeah. I'm sure it's going great. Okay, let's talk about the Warriors. It's over with Klay Thompson.
Yep.
My basketball romantic soul, a little chip got taken out of it with this. Not all good things last forever. Warriors lost Chris Paul's salary slot. They might lose Klay Thompson for nothing. They might sign and trade him somewhere and get something. I mean, obviously, this is we should take a second to just point out that this is the end of the Splash Brothers. Like, we get so caught up in the transaction madness and where did Golden State go wrong and where are they going from here and how can they salvage the remainder of Steph Curry's career in prime. This was a special thing that these dudes all had together. And Klay is a one-of-a-kind NBA character who has had so many indelible moments next to these guys. Obviously 4 championships, including the 2022 championships, which we kind of felt it at the time, but now it feels more concrete. Like, you want a feel-good ending for the Warriors. That was probably it. That was probably the feel-good ending for the Warriors. And it was amazing. It was an incredible crowning achievement in Steph Curry's career. It was Klay recovering to play well enough after 2 catastrophic leg injuries and 3 years almost out of basketball. These guys had an absolutely magical chemistry, the 3 of them together. And Klay, we know the just single-handedly destroying the Thunder in Game 6, making so many preposterous threes. Remember the one that Steve Kerr turns to the crowd and is just like, anyone see that? And I'll never forget, like, people forget Game 5 of the Raptors finals because it was the KD getting hurt game. Klay made so many monster shots on the stretch of that game. And in Game 6 in Golden State, had 30 points in 31 minutes, was just cooking. And you could feel it, like, these motherfuckers are going to get this to 7 in Toronto, and they might win. They might do it without KD. Then he gets hurt, and he comes back to shoot the free throws. I think that might have been the loudest I've ever heard any arena that I've ever been in when Klay came out to shoot the free throws.
Yep.
And now he's gone. And look, like, sometimes it's just time to move on. It's time for Klay. It's time for the Warriors. A lot of hurt feelings here. I think the timing factor, like, Klay watched all these dudes get paid, right? And it's just kind of like what we talked about with PG. They paid Wiggins right after the finals when he was on a high and the team was a championship contender. Literally, by definition, they just won the championship. They paid Draymond a year later when, yeah, they weren't a finalist again, but they had made the conference semis, the second round, and put up a pretty good fight against the Lakers and kind of had reason to believe, like, we got something going on here. Then the punch happens and the whole thing has been sideways. I guess the punch happened before that, but the team has not been the same since the punch. And now it comes time to pay Klay, just the way the contracts work, and they could have extended him before. I get that. Now it's clear that, much like the Clippers, this team's kind of over as a championship contender, and it's time to pivot in some way. How did we get here with the Warriors? Like, where did this go sideways for them, where not just with Klay, but where it's like,
Yeah.
we're reaching. Curry is still an All NBA player, and it's again kind of like, where is this team stacking up, and what can they actually do now?
Well, it's funny. It's like it's almost like um the best thing that happened to them was winning in 22 against Boston, and the worst thing that happened was them winning in 22. Because it almost like if there was a point in or a point in the road to kind of go in a different direction, it would have probably been after that. What was it in the year they lost to Memphis, I think, in the play-in tournament.
2021, and
Yeah.
that was the parallel they wanted to make
Yep.
for 24-25 is we finished super strong in 2021.
Yep.
We felt our vibes coming back. We were confident coming into 21-22 that we got something. They finished 27-12 this year. They felt their vibes coming back. They lose in the play-in, and you could hear them talking themselves into like, is this a sequel? Are we going to come back roaring next year? And it doesn't appear to be in the cards.
No, it isn't. It's Listen, what's going to happen with Klay is if you're going to create you're going to create a trade exception. He's going to wind up going to either Dallas or, I don't. And we've talked at length, and we're going to talk about it in a couple minutes here about Los Angeles here. I mean, those are really the only viable options, I think, because he's got the decision to make, and of course, Golden State has to help facilitate it here.
I assume you mean the Lakers by Los Angeles.
Yeah, the Lakers. Yeah. But where do you go now? Is like it's like almost like you're bridging the young kids with Kuminga, who's extension eligible, and Moody, who's extension eligible, and Brandon, who's coming off a terrific year. And then you still have the older players. It's like you still have that mix with whether Curry, Green, Wiggins. You got Peyton and Looney here.
Are you saying, Bobby, that the Warriors are operating on two timelines?
Yeah, again,
the two timeline plan
again. Well, this timeline is going to get more expensive because you're going to have to pay those your second, what do you call it, the second foundation, whatever they call it there. So they're not one of the. I don't think I can say they're in the top 8 in the Western Conference. I think, listen, they had for a 46 win team, and as you said, 27-12 down a stretch, but getting your doors blown off in Sacramento basically kind of raised the red flag.
The two timelines thing was always a myth. It was an accident. It wasn't a plan. It was an accident. Durant leaves. Klay's hurt. Steph breaks his hand 3 games into the 2019-2020 season. And all of a sudden you stink. Like, okay, two timelines. Like, this is great. Like, and it was a very rare, freshest chance to be the Spurs, which is what they talked about, to get Kawhi, to find the bridge where, like, we're just going to be good for 25 years. Doesn't happen in the NBA. This is what happens in the NBA. You get old and bad, and the young guys you get aren't good enough in time for the old guys, and then they aren't good enough on their own to be the foundation of a title team. TBD on that for the Warriors, but we'll see. This is what happens. This is normal. The Spurs was not normal. The opportunity the Warriors had was not normal. And that opportunity netted James Wiseman. And if you're looking at the pivot point where, like, they did this era went sideways and they didn't pull off what they could have pulled off, and it was always a low percentage chance, even with the second pick, that's it. Because Kuminga, who they got in the crazy, awesome Wiggins D'Lo trade, that's a great pick for number 7. Moody is a very good pick for 14, I think. Like, he's probably above expected return. Like, they hit doubles on those picks. They didn't hit home runs, but they hit doubles. The Wiseman one, I had a friend who did not only did not hit a double, I had a friend whose little sister, when we were younger, played softball. And they had a rule in that softball league that you are not allowed to strike out. It was bad for your self-esteem to strike out. And this poor girl swung and missed at the third strike like 25 times in a row in one game. And I was there because my little sister was on her team. And her mom came running out of the stands and said, "That's it. She's out. She struck out. End this now." That's the James Wiseman pick for the Warriors. And that's, like, other than that, this is just what happens. Like, good teams get old and not that great. And the Warriors are still good. Like, to win 46 games in the West is good. They're still a good team. It's just, I don't know what the roadmap. there are reports they looked at Levine.
Yeah.
Fine.
Yeah.
Like,
And,
whatever.
another name that they've looked at, that been told is Markkanen in Utah.
Okay.
That,
Let's do that now.
yeah. Because that's going to be the next guy probably to keep an eye on here.
We said it on TV yesterday. I think
Yeah.
it's a guy to keep an eye on right now.
Yep.
Now, Utah can raise and extend him now.
Well, no, here's the tricky thing is, so he's extension eligible for like I think it's like 113. It's below his market value, but he can't get renegotiated until August. So you're basically kind of sitting in a 1 month window, with all this money. If you're ever going to go that direction, I don't have any inclination that they're going to go to the Sabonis route where they bump Demonis's contract up to the max and then extend it off that. I don't think we're heading there on him.
Really?
On Markkanen.
You don't think Utah would do that?
I don't know. I haven't talked to them. I haven't talked to people and within the league as far as with that. I think it's what you can do with your cap space now, and then maybe a month from now figure out what you have left to bump it up, because that's realistically the only way. He's not going to extend likely. That's the only way that you have the security that he's going to be here and not on an expiring contract. Because if you're not going to do it, then you're going to have to trade him, right? I mean, that's the reality of it.
I think the expectation from Markkanen's camp is they are going to do it.
Yeah.
I was under the impression Utah would be happy doing it. Obviously, the Bridges trade, led them to send smoke signals out like, hey, 5 firsts to swap. Like, lines are open. Our phones work. We got good reception. Give us a call. And it reminds me, like, I was feeling it didn't make it onto the show. I was on Get Up one day last week, and I said, guys, the name I'm getting asked about most is Mikal Bridges. Like, I know we want to talk about the Lakers in this, and then like 24 hours later, that night, Mikal gets traded. I'm not quite feeling the same kind of vibes with Lauri, but I think I just like, I'm keeping an eye on it for sure. That's what we said yesterday. You want to talk about some teams for him? Because I do think he's the most interesting domino left in the league.
Yep.
So Oklahoma City was the obvious one.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's gone now. For now at least. Like, and they have this issue of like, can they really take on a third max salary?
Yeah. I got a team for you.
Well, can I say my favorite team?
Oh, you're gonna take it, aren't you?
Does it start with an S?
Yep.
Is it 3 words long?
Does the nickname end with an S?
Yes. So the Spurs are the team I would watch.
Yeah.
Because they got a lot of assets.
Yep.
And he's just the perfect, like, first of all, can we all just agree Chris Paul going to San Antonio is awesome? Like, just awesome. It's not Lob City anymore because he's 39 years old or whatever he is, but just I would love to listen in on the phone call between Chris Paul and Greg Popovich. Like, the amount of basketball experience and IQ in that conversation is just unbelievable. Unbelievable fit. I love it. I love everything about it. He's going to Chris Paul, even at this age, look at the Warriors on-off numbers. When he plays, his team generally does very well, including Golden State. Great signing, home run. Markkanen is the exact right age where you say it lifts our ceiling with Wembanyama now. And by the way, this dude is ready to make an all-NBA team immediately. And he's young enough where we're not going all in on a player that's too far out of Wembanyama's timeline. I could see the rubber meeting the road at Devin Vassell. And that's the most interesting piece to me for the Spurs, because they rightfully believe he is an absolute A-plus fit as a three-point shooter. He's not a 3-and-D guy yet, but he's got some tools defensively that he needs to lock into next to Wemby. He's the best fit next to Wemby that they have on the team long-term. We'll see how this Castle kid pans out. And I could see the Jazz being like, well, why would we do this deal without him in it? And so that's interesting, but they're the team I would pay attention. What else did you want to say about the Spurs?
No, that was who just the people you kind of just poke around the league. That's the team that's kind of come up a lot. Them, certainly, as I mentioned, Golden State. I just don't know.
Do they have enough?
That's the thing, right? Like, what do you got?
That was always the thing with the Sixers. It's like Sixers, but there was all this dreams of Markkanen going there. I'm like, and they could trade up to 4 first-round picks. There's
Yeah.
some shenanigans, but like, who's the player?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah. There's no, there's no,
someone can beat that.
yeah. And I think that's what Utah, like, listen, they've got 15 or 16, I think, future ones. They got all the Cleveland and Minnesota. They got a leaker first in 27, I think. Yeah, 2027. But eventually you got to get better. Like, like you got to have like a found, like there's got to be like a guy involved if you're going to trade him that comes back, not just, draft picks and expiring contracts.
I thought about Sacramento. I've mentioned them for Markkanen
Yeah,
before.
Sacramento, I would think, certainly, if Ingram, with depending on what happens with him in New Orleans, you've got Barnes, you've got Herter, you've got most of your draft picks. You still owe Atlanta a protected one in 25. It's a matter of, like, it comes back to, like, what are you comfortable paying Ingram? You want to max him out. You got Fox and Sabonis also. That comes down to that.
Well, and they've been pretty not open, but they've been concerned about, like, you just said, max out Brandon Ingram. We're talking about maxing out Lauri Markkanen.
Yeah.
It's Lowry, by the way. It
I know,
really makes people say Lauri. It's not Lowry.
Lowry.
It makes them mad. It's Lowry. They've been concerned about, like, well, if we have 3 guys making like $150 million a year combined.
Yeah.
Yes, the cap is going way up. The apron's going way up. Like, do we lose the wiggle room and the optionality that we have right now, particularly if we think Keegan Murray could be a guy going forward and we have a couple years left on his rookie deal? I think it's interesting for them. I bet Miami would love to get involved in anything Markkanen. I just don't think they have enough either. I mean, if they start throwing in your Jaquez and your Jovic and all of that, like, maybe you have a conversation.
Yeah.
That's the one that I'm looking at. Because the Jazz can't do this thing again where we're pretty good for the first part of the year, then we're pretty bad for the last part of the year, and we end up picking 10th. Yay! Like, they just can't do that again.
Well, 5-12 to finish the season is not good enough.
Well, it's not when you're 500. Like,
no,
at that point, I'm just like, just be 500 and make the play in. Like, all right, back to anything else on the Warriors. I mean, it's just like, I love Klay. I've defended Klay since his injuries. I think people have really been too hard on him. He still shot 40% from 3. Yeah, he's not the same defender. You know why? He tore his Achilles and he tore his ACL 2 years in a row.
Yep. No, listen,
all-time big game player.
I mean, I'm sure there'll be more that come out. I would say that, wherever he goes, it's going to be significantly less than what he just finished on, and I think that's the reality of it. I mean, and I think it will be probably more than the 13 or 12-8 non-tax, especially if it's a sign and trade to Dallas, because they can do a little bit more, especially when they get Najee Marshall on a really good deal. I thought, I like that a lot.
Me too.
So I think I've said all along, like, the guy's made $270 million and he was miserable making 43 last year. And I know that sounds terrible for, like, the like, we live in the basketball world where it's like, really, it's like fiction, right? It's not like real world problems, I always say. And that was the reality. Like, he made a lot of money and he wasn't happy. I mean, you don't need a rocket scientist to figure that out, where for him, like, recently there wasn't an offer. There wasn't a 2 for 48, or it wasn't a 2 for 50. Like, it just basically, like, I think Golden State kind of knew what the writing on the wall, what was going to be and everything. So, every marriage has a breakup. Some is pretty, but I do think there is some healing, because at the end of the day, if it is Dallas, and we'll learn more about it, that's the place he wanted to get to, and the only place he can get there is with Golden State's help.
The ovation he gets in his first game back at Chase Center should be thunderous and many minutes long. What I've always loved about Klay, and I wrote a profile of him in 2016 during the finals, the SoCal fun boat guy vibes sort of hide it. He is an absolutely ferocious competitor. And that was the first thing anybody talked about when you asked people at the Warriors, people who worked him out at the draft, talked about with him. Ron Adams, who's the sort of sage of the Warriors, gave me a great quote for that. I was looking at it yesterday. He said, he loses the way you want a player to lose.
Mm-hmm.
It strikes him in the heart. And he remembered everybody who was taken above him in the draft. He's one of those guys like Draymond. He's like, remembers everybody who's taken above him in the draft. And I've told this story before, but the Spurs brought him back for a secret second workout right before that draft. And he was just so on fire in the workout and so just like locked in. Chip England, who's now a coach for the Thunder, told Pop and the brain trust there, like, there's something about this guy that reminds me of Manu Ginobili in terms of his competitive fire. And like, that's not a name people in San Antonio use lightly, Manu
Yeah.
Ginobili. I love Klay. I wish him well. We don't always get what our romantic basketball souls want. Let's talk about the Lakers.
Yeah.
LeBron, I got to hand it to LeBron. It's a hell of a thing. And I'm not saying it's meaningless. Like it's a real thing that he's offered to take a pay cut. It could really help the Lakers. It is a hell of a thing to be like, I will take a pay cut if you sign one of like these 4 dudes.
How about, I'll tell you what, Jonas Valanciunas, he should get, when our ESPN social put that out, like the 3 people that LeBron would take the discount, and he was up there with Harden and Klay, like he should get we should send him a big frame, have that framed in his TV room. He was one of the 3 for the LeBron discount.
That's one of those ones that just comes up on Twitter. Jonas Valanciunas, 3 years, $30 million to the Washington Wizards. And you're just like, swipe. Like the equivalent to swipe, whatever the swipe is that you don't care. It's like, swipe.
We're going to talk Murray. We're going to talk Murray later. So I'm going to tie that into this.
Okay.
To Murray.
But anyway, but it's a hell of a thing for LeBron to be like, all right, I'll do the pay cut. If you get like, now we're down on the list that was public. We're down to 1 guy, Klay. Yeah. Otherwise, I'm taking the max, because it's a genius move, because it makes him look generous and it makes Pelinka in the front office look like failures if they can't find one of the guys. I don't know. But to me, what's interesting about it is, so LeBron taking a pay cut, and there's a lot of gymnastics.
Yeah, listen, at the end of the day, like, there has to be a trade involved here somewhere, right? Like there's got to be.
What you're saying there is they've got to cut enough salary for his pay cut. Like he's not going to make $10 million a year.
$25 million discount.
Right. If you want to open up the big mid-level exception, you've got to reach a point of salary where he can take a realistic pay cut, and you still have that $12 million exception that you could use on somebody like Klay.
Yeah.
To me, what that signals, more interesting than the LeBron pay cut thing, is say they pull it off and they use the mid-level exception on Klay or whoever, right? They just drafted Dalton Connect, who they love. Everyone's jumping over backwards that he fell to them. We spent the entire year talking about how the Lakers have 3 first-round picks to trade. They're going to go star hunting, Trae Young, Dejounte Murray. Well, he's gone. It doesn't seem like that so much anymore, doesn't it? Like, doesn't it seem like they kind of want to build like sustainably, like use our mid-level here, Dalton Connect here. We got our picks. We got Max Christie at 4 for 32.
Max Christie. Yep,
it doesn't seem like they want to go that route anymore.
They don't. Listen, at the end of the day, if a big name star became available, and which isn't right now, I'm sure they would dip their toes in there. Dejounte Murray doesn't fall into that equation. I mean, he doesn't. And I think that's where they've kind of gone away from that, gone away from that thinking. I think certainly the CBA scares them a little bit here as far as from a roster building standpoint, but they're going to be, but here's the funny thing, Zach, they're going to be in the second apron, like as much as we say, like, the big 3, max contract, the Lakers are going to be like $190+ million, because you have the 2 max guys, and then you got a lot of like 8, 10 to 20 guys.
Yeah.
How about, it's interesting, and there would be a lot of, gymnastics to figure it out. Like DeMar DeRozan's still available, like he's like your next best guy, right? I don't know he the non-tax is 12.8. Like, and I've said this to, like, some of the agents I've talked to and everything like that. Like, you don't want to be part of a sign and trade, because you're stuck on an average contract for 3 years, right? It's got to be a 3-year deal. Like, you almost want to take a discount somewhere. And I know DeMar's older, Tyus Jones, another guy, and then get your value back for next offseason when you got 15 teams that have cap space. Like, the market will be a lot better than it is right now.
That's interesting. I mean, all these names were bouncing around for the Lakers. And yeah, they will have their picks going forward. Like if they go this sort of sustainability route where they keep Reeves, they keep Hachimura, whatever, and they trade D'Lo because they have to open up mid level, whatever it is, and they're not playing well, they could always revisit going star hunting down the road. But you look at this Lakers team in the West, and LeBron obviously he still wants to win. If you have LeBron and Anthony Davis making $100 million, you are trying to win at the highest level. They made the conference finals 2 years ago. They won one playoff game this year, and you can wish that away as well. They played Denver. That was a nightmare matchup for them. I just don't like, I get that. And they were competitive against Denver. Jamal Murray makes two essentially game winning shots, close games. It's just such a gauntlet. That's cool that you're competitive against Denver. And I keep saying this about the Lakers. Yeah, they have the upside to be competitive or win a playoff series against almost any team in the West if enough things go right for them. To win three is just a much different animal. And I just think I don't really see any pathway for this team to become a tier one contender anymore in the West. When you look at Minnesota's rising, Oklahoma City's, I mean, we don't need to go through the teams.
Yeah.
Which is okay. Like, there's nothing wrong with being a good team in the Western Conference, which is what the Lakers are. I don't know that there's a roadmap there to be a great team, other than you just got to get insanely healthy, which they were last year, and you got to get some luck in the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, it's basically from a year ago. You basically have to catch teams that have one or two guys out. You get on a little bit of a run, and you get to a Western Conference Finals. It's like, like it's hard because
different West now too.
Different West. You've got Russell on this expiring contract. There's not many teams out there for him for takers. Like, there are not even teams out there that with cap space that would take him. And the cap space game is running out. I mean, we just saw Tobias Harris, 2 for whatever, 57, I guess. In Detroit, their room's going away. Charlotte might be in play if a team wants to drop money off, and we have Miles Bridges is still out there too as a free agent. Utah is in play as far as, but none of these teams.
Utah just signed Drew Eubanks to a 2-year, $10 million deal according to Woj. So, huzzah!
So it's hard. It's hard to say that change is coming with this roster here just because they're tied into what they have.
Enough Lakers. I mean, we could talk about the Klay fit and stuff, but let's just see where Klay ends up before we have that discussion. You want to do rapid fire through some other ones?
Yeah, let's go.
Let's do some rapid fire. Where do I want to go? Let's talk more about Hartenstein. What was the number that broke?
3 for 87.
3 for 87.
Yeah.
Maybe there is a team option on it, which would again potentially clear Hartenstein off the year that the J-Dub and Chet big deals kick in. I mean, we talked about earlier, they needed a little bit more size. They needed a little bit more rebounding. He's an incredible rebounder. I do think like he was maybe a little overextended minutes wise, and I'm not sure he could have handled that minute load that he was handling in the playoffs for too long. But 25 minutes is perfect for him. And that's half with Chet, half without, whatever it is. I think that's a great fit for them. I think his passing is a massively important skill for them. His little floater is a massively important little, like, we don't got nothing else on this possession. Shea can just drop it to him as a roller. That's an element that they didn't really have, and maybe it marginalizes big Jalen Williams a little bit. That's fine. Like, to me, I look at this team and like, there ain't many holes left in it, and they still have some cards to play. Like, they're going for it. Sam Presti lived up to his vow of like, we're going to use this as an experiment. Let's see what the playoffs are like with this team. We learned some lessons. They're not all in because they have 9,000 picks still coming to them, and they haven't used any of them remarkably. This team is going to be awesome next year. We talked about Caruso already. So I think this is a good fit for them.
Yeah, I mean, listen, they looked at it as a 2-year window before Chet and Jalen Williams were going to sign their rookie extensions, and eventually Shea. So they had this pot of money sitting here of $30 million. We've talked about before, they never go out and spend on free agents, right? They usually build within, trade, draft, and they said, you know what? What did the playoffs show us? What did the regular season show us? go up and shore some of our needs. He'll come off the bench, as you said, he'll play 20 to 25 minutes, probably similar to what his role was when he got to New York, right? Like that's kind of the role he is, and it's certainly expanded because of the Mitchell Robinson signing here. But he gets an average of 28, 29. I would think there will be a team option on that third year just to give them the optionality when those big contracts start. Because what you could do is on the team option, you could decline it and then you can extend off it and you can do all these different, different things. You can lower that number here. So I
And
really like,
if that's the case, you're kind of paying him for the
yeah.
convenience of the team option with this massive annual salary that Isaiah Hartenstein never dreamed he would get, and he's more than earned it. He's a very good player.
Well, listen, they looked at New York had 4 for 72. That's the most they could pay, which is a good contract. But when you have a team like what Oklahoma City was able to do, it just kind of, it just blew that offer off the table.
So let's talk about New York then.
Yeah.
What does this mean for the Knicks? What options do they have now cap wise?
So here's what I would keep an eye on over the next couple of days here. That this Brooklyn New York deal will probably expand, where New York will put additional salary in. We'll see who that's going to be, whether it be a sign and trade Precious Achua or sign and trade out. One of these free agents. Hard for me to say it's Deuce McBride just because you got to put
do it.
Yeah, just because it's salary. The interesting thing is that the rule, there's so many different rules here. Like you can't stack minimums anymore. Like you just can't put minimum, start adding up contracts. You can't do that during the summertime. So it actually has to be like a real contract. So I would keep an eye on New York adding salary. That would mean they would become hard capped at the second apron now, not the first. That gives them another $11 million in flexibility. They'd have 20 million total to go out and you sign your 2 draft picks, and then maybe you use the tax mid-level or some mechanism there with New York. But they will not.
You start Mitchell Robinson. You go back to starting Mitchell Robinson as your center.
You're probably going to need some backup, right, as a kind of an insurance policy there.
Yeah, absolutely. If it's not Achua, you're going to need a backup. I agree with you. You got to keep Deuce. He's too important to your bench. And, they do, if they keep Randall, and, this is a discussion for down the line. They do. Tibbs has never wanted to do this, but they do have more leeway now in terms of wings to play Randall at the 5 a little bit just to sop up some minutes.
Totally agree. I mean, that's the funny thing that, like the Bridges trade and certainly Anunoby resigning and what they've, what New York did in the playoffs is like Randall, we forget about him. Like we forget about Julius Randall sometimes here. And you can certainly go that, direction.
And obviously Hartenstein is a big loss for the Knicks. He was absolutely phenomenal for them in the playoffs. I mean, just the rebounding alone against Philadelphia was outrageous. And that floater as a fail-safe shot for them was huge. Mitchell Robinson can match him as a rebounder, not the same versatile offensive player, a little bit more of a dynamic finisher, but not in his universe as a passer. So it's a loss for the Knicks. It's a meaningful loss for a team that's all in to win the title next year. And I think they have the upside to challenge Boston. It's a loss, and it's going to be interesting to see how they adjust to it.
Well, here's the other thing, and it's like, we go back to the CBA and stuff. It's like, basically it's like, what the league has said is like, instead of 8 shiny new toys, we're only going to allow you to have 5 shiny new toys, right?
And by the way, I don't want to hear any owners whining about the apron. I don't want to hear about the union whining about the apron. Like, y'all negotiated this. And I remember as soon as you tweeted the details about the picks being frozen and then relegated to the end, it was immediately obvious at the time we talked about it. This is going to function like a hard cap for a lot of teams. And so you can't now 8 months later be like, oh my God, it's a hard cap. This stinks for us. You did it. You wrote it.
Here's the other thing too that I find funny, because there are a lot of, I call it, like, I was joking with a team this morning, like, come to Bobby Marks' therapy session here. You can sit on my couch and complain about the apron here. Here's the funny thing is that the league had the league phased in all these rules, right? Like the apron stuff didn't start until the hard stuff until this past April. And everybody used it, as I called it, the buffet line. Everybody, the Clippers, the Bucks, the Suns, they went to the buffet line and they stuffed their face trying to get in every little rule here. And eventually they knew what the consequences were going to be. What I have loved, and I talked to a team about this, This CBA is like 7 years. Would I have loved for the league to say, you know what? We're going to treat this year as an experiment year, right? We're going to see what works and what doesn't. And then when we get to the summer, we're going to come back and look at maybe we can alter things and stuff like that. It didn't happen. And now you just got to deal with the rules.
And by the way, as we go through other deals, a team that said F you to the second apron, Phoenix, I said, what have they done this offseason? Royce O'Neal, 4 years, $44 million. It's a good deal for Phoenix, although Royce has struggled from three. In his last 3 playoffs, he's 17 of 65 on threes. He needs to make shots, but they had no other options. He's a good two-way wing player. That's a good deal for Phoenix. Let's go rapid fire. Obi Toppin, 4 years, $60 million, back to the Pacers. Thoughts?
It helped that Jalen Smith opts out. Jalen Smith goes to Chicago at 3 for 27. That's 5 that comes off. They're under the luxury tax. They retain their 6th man. It's a good deal for Obi, considering, guys are starting to get slotted based on where they're like 6th man, $12 million guy, backup point guard, $8 million guy. That's kind of how teams are starting to look at it. Really good deal. I think good deal for both sides.
Yeah, I like it. I said repeatedly, I think he's done enough where they absolutely need to retain him because they did make the conference finals last year, and he was an important part of it. His game and his shooting held up in the playoffs. He fits with Halliburton. And whenever Jarris Walker is ready or they need to pivot, that's a tradable contract easily.
Yep.
Like it's a little bit above the mid-level exception. And you want to say like this will come up with Patrick Williams. Oh, we could have leveraged restricted free agency and really played hardball. Like 4 years for 60 is just whatever. It's fine. Patrick Williams, 5 years for 90, 18 million a pop. So the Bulls pay him more than the Pacers paid a guy who like did well in the playoffs. Patrick Williams is essentially not developed in 4 seasons with the Bulls. And he's had a lot of injuries. And the difference is he's only 22 years old. Obi Toppin's is 20. I think there's like Obi Toppin's 26. I think there's like 3.5 years separating them. And so you're paying for that upside. I don't mind paying for the upside because there's been glimpses of like, oh, he shot 40-something% on corner threes here. He defended Giannis okay here. He has the tools to be this sort of 3-and-D player. Oh, he screens and rolls and makes plays out of the pick and roll. He just doesn't do like anything with the ball yet. And like, I understand he's 22 years old. He was the 4th pick in the draft. I'd like to see him be consistently good at something. I'd like to see him produce points like consistently before I pay him 90 million. This is a case where, but again, like it's like right away, 14% of the cap or something like that. And it'll get down to like 10% of the cap. It's ultimately going to be no harm, no foul. But this is one where I would have said, my man, you just haven't done enough. Like go get an offer sheet and come back to us.
Well, if that was the deal, let's rewind the clock and it was last October, and it came out like 5 for 90, I would have been okay. It's an upside extension based on maybe what and then, certainly he's got injuries this year.
He was horrible for the first 2 months of the season, like beyond horrible. And then he recovered. But
I mean, it's almost like, hey, he was picked in I don't know what pick he was. He top 8. And we drafted him. He was the 4th pick in the draft. We can't let him go. Like that's the reality. But who else out there? We saw what the Thunder did. Orlando wasn't going to go get him.
Maybe Detroit. Maybe Detroit is like maybe they just throw some crap at the wall team.
Yeah.
But I do think that's a restricted free agent cudgel use thing, like other teams might do. But it's fine, whatever. I've always like he's 22 years old. I see the upside. KCP to the Magic, 3 years, 66 million. Can't remember is there an option on that one?
Player option,
year 3. We've talked about the Denver angle. It's breaking up one of the best starting fives of the last 5-6 years in basketball. That stinks for Denver. KCP didn't have a great playoffs, didn't have a great series against the Minnesota, and he's getting into his mid-30s. I get it. Somebody suggested to me yesterday, a front office guy, another team. So 366, Denver's not going there to 20 million a year. And like there was some reporting that Denver offered something close to that to keep him, like this was Jeremy Grant 2.0 when they offered something close and he left for a bigger role. I heard a lot of pushback to that. I'm not sure what Denver offered was actually that close to 3 for 66 with a player option. I don't know what it was, but I know that I heard pushback to that. It's always hard to tell. Someone did say to me, okay, so if you can't match that, why not go years and say, can we get you on like 5 for 88, 5 for 90, and use the years as a way to get you? I thought that's fair. That takes him that does take him into his late 30s. It hurts Denver. I
Yeah.
mean, I love it for Orlando. You slide him into the Markelle Fultz spot, and you have Suggs, KCP, Franz, Paolo, and whoever they have as a starting center, currently Wendell Carter Jr., whatever it ends up being. Like that's a great fit, and they're going to be a bear to play against next year. It's not like this home run long-term fit, but I like it for them.
Oh, I definitely like it for them. I mean, they were already what 10th. I think they finished 10th last year in defensive efficiency. They trended in the top for most of the year here.
I said
Um,
Fultz. I said Fultz. Gary Harris had usurped Fultz's starting
yeah,
spot, but you get what I mean. The fifth
yeah,
starter.
no, definitely. I think they still got a bunch of room left too, man. They still got like 23, 24 million dollars in room. You know, maybe you can go take a swing on a shooter who's left of the group. Is it Gary Trent at a low number or Buddy Hield at a low number? I mean, the market's going to dry up for those guys if you want to do that here. But I do like KCP and Orlando. Listen, we saw Calvin. It's funny, a lot of GMs and front office people have been more on the record when we saw basically the tea leaves. What Calvin Booth said, hey, well, Christian will come in, we'll be okay. Like they were like prepared for him, for him to leave.
I guess that is what it is. I mean, if I'm a Nuggets fan, I'm like, man, we've had a lot of good players go out the door.
Hey, listen, you're going to rely on those young kids. That's what's going to happen here. You're
Well,
going to,
and I mentioned, Christian Brown slides into the starting five. That's
yeah,
cool. Like that's gonna he doesn't shoot it like KCP. He's
yeah,
gonna be a very good defender. He's sort of a chaos guy in transition, which I like for them. I like when Denver runs a little bit more. He doesn't have the same kind of polish in the two-man like left elbow game that
yeah,
KCP has, which by the way is going to translate great to playing with Paolo in Orlando. Um, the shooting is going to be the question mark, but then you have the sort of backup to the backup problem. And I said last year, I loved what I saw from Julian Strawther early in the season. I think his injury short-circuited what could have been a season in which he ended up in their playoff rotation as a bit player. Obviously, Peyton Watson was in their playoff rotation. I thought Michael Malone went away from him too early in the Minnesota series. I would keep an eye on Strawther. I liked what I saw. He was a playmaker on
yeah,
defense as well as a shooter who fits well with Jokic. And they'll give Pickett a chance. And this kid they drafted, they traded up to draft
yeah.
this
Deron
Holmes
Holmes
kid.
is a nice
They'll
player.
they'll
Yeah,
give him a chance too. And ultimately, that's what they're counting on. But I like it for Orlando. They're sort of in this like we got to figure out what the big talent play is going to be for us around Paolo and Franz. We don't necessarily want to take the ball out of their hands. I think they understand at some point they're going to need a bigger talent swing to really, really leap up the East. And they're okay figuring that out later. And also seeing like, can we get the full season out of Jonathan Isaac that we kind of got in the last part of the season last year? Because that becomes a very interesting player for them too. But I think it's a nice contract for the
yeah.
Magic.
I have no issue with that deal at all.
What have we forgotten? JB
Well,
Bickerstaff. I don't really care about that. I
yeah,
mean, it's a good
here's
hire,
the
whatever.
here's the interesting thing. So Friday night we get breaking news, right? Dejounte Murray goes to New Orleans. Larry Nance, Dyson Daniels, 2025 Lakers first, which is a nice pick in case the wheels fall off there, right? In a really good draft. 27 least favorable of Milwaukee and New Orleans. And then what's interesting about this, and this is just non on the court, but the cap mechanics is that so DeJounte Murray's got this big trade bonus, right? It's the biggest one in the NBA. It's $12 million.
Woo,
DeJounte,
man, that's great for
oh yeah,
DeJounte
and you know
Murray.
who pays that? Atlanta. They signed him and they pay it. So
All
he's
right.
he's in the last year of this contract before the extension kicks in, right? It goes from like 18 to 25 million starting today. So basically, you had like this window to do this deal before the new number kicked in. All these different mechanics here. So I said like you got to get it done now, right? Like because you don't want to add more salary here. the interesting thing was because New Orleans was 277,000 below the luxury tax, the trade bonus counts towards the tax. So if they would have done it like yesterday, they would have put themselves into tax and lost $12 million. So what you're going to see is this deal expand. I wouldn't be surprised if this is part of a 3-team deal with the Wizards and Valanciunas goes in a signing trade to Washington into one of those. They've got a couple big trade exceptions here. But you get Murray in New Orleans with McCollum. Ingram's going to be the guy to keep an eye on. Definitely. There are teams certainly sniffing around about Brandon Ingram. You get Zion. Depth is a little bit, you still have, you got Herb, you got Trey Murphy, who's eligible for extension. I don't know how sustainable, Zach, it is as far as all these guys making $30 million. Like when you have McCollum, Zion, Murray, and then you're going to add a fourth guy if you give Ingram an extension here.
Yeah, something's got to give. I mean,
Yeah.
It's too many guys who need the ball. It's too many guys who need the ball. And you mentioned teams sniffing around Brandon Ingram. Any come to mind as fits?
No, I mean, listen, I think Cleveland would be a perfect fit, but I don't know how you could do it when you
got nothing. They got nothing to
well,
trade
no,
unless they're trading Garland or Allen.
Yeah,
or
and your salaries, like you're going to probably extend Mobley. You've got Donovan, who we'll hear soon whether there's an extension. You got Jared Allen, you got Mobley. Like you got a lot of big. Basically, you would have to trade like Jared Allen and Max Strus for Brandon Ingram, and then you're gonna have to max him out, right? Like I don't know if that makes sense at all.
That feels like one where it's both teams feel like, are we giving up too much? Like Brandon Ingram, he's made an all-star team. Jared Allen is an important part of our team. The Pelicans do need a center. I mean, that's they need multiple centers now.
Yeah.
I mean, Valanciunas is gone, Nance is gone in this deal.
Yep.
They did draft a center in the first round, but they need a veteran center, and that's why Jared Allen's name, I think, would logically come up. Cleveland also just has no pick equity left, really,
Nope.
or very little of it. And I don't like Mitchell. Ingram is just such an interesting dude because he's going to need to. I've said this before about him. You look at his numbers, like, okay, 24, 6, and 5. Like, it must be awesome. And something is just not quite. The impact on winning does not match the numbers. And I don't know if it's defense. I don't know if it's shot selection. I don't know if it's too many long twos, not enough threes. Like, he's going to eventually get to a team. And Fred Vinson, who's now with the Pistons, their shooting coach, talked with me about this a couple years ago, and I wrote about BI. They wanted him to take like 7, 8 threes a game off the dribble, catch and shoot. And he just does not want to do that. You can see him catch the ball and be like, yeah, no. He's going to, like, if he ends up with a guy, whoever it is, like including Zion, who's a clear number one on offense compared to him, he's just going to have to shoot more threes and defend better. His playmaking is like a B. You'd like it to be a little better than that. If he wants to play with the ball and work his way into long twos, he's just sort of a trickier fit, because this is what you run into with, like, I think it's interesting to contrast the Dejounte Murray deal with the Mikal Bridges deal, right? Like, so for Dejounte Murray, they trade 2 first-round picks in Dyson Daniels. You want to call it Dyson Daniels a 3rd first-round pick? That's fine. Yeah. I like Dyson Daniels a lot. He's going to have to shoot it a little better eventually to, like, actually become a real good rotation guy. I think that's a really nice swing for Atlanta on him. But 2.5 first-round picks, let's say. Mikal Bridges gets 5 and a swap. And you say to yourself, like, is Mikal Bridges that much better than Dejounte Murray? Like, Dejounte Murray's made an all-star team. It was an injury replacement. He's made an all-star team. Like, and then you sort of look at it, and obviously every trade is its own entity. This is an apples to oranges thing. But 2 things stand out. Number one, the position of the team making the trade really matters. The Knicks feel like they can win the championship, and they have extra draft picks, and they feel like they can pay a premium for that reason. The Hawks, not in that position. And then similar to Ingram, it's like, okay, so Dejounte Murray, yeah, he shot really well from 3 last year in Atlanta, playing a little more off the ball. He's going to have to duplicate that again and again. He needs the ball, and he's much smaller than Mikal Bridges. So he's not like a wing defender. And you just come into this like, okay, so if I have like the 15th best ball handling option or 21st best ball handling option, who's just okay as an off ball option, both on defense and on offense, what is that really? Whereas Mikal Bridges, like, he's not best as an on ball option. He can do it, but he does all these other things off the ball as a shooter and a defender that fits snugly on a winning team. It's just interesting. I actually like. I think the Murray trade is fine for both teams. There's another shooter drop in New Orleans. They needed a guy to run the offense in crunch time. Their crunch time offense was a disaster, and Dejounte Murray made a bunch of huge shots last year, and I think he's a pretty stable guy. I think he'll defend better in a different context. That trade Dejounte thing did not work. I like it for New Orleans. And like for Atlanta, I mean, KP wrote about this. It's like 85% of what you sent out for Dejounte Murray. Like maybe 75%. You get the Lakers pick, which could get interesting. That Milwaukee New Orleans pick is probably going to be just okay. You get Dyson Daniels, who's the 8th pick in the draft. Larry Nance, maybe you can flip him down the line, although, maybe you keep him for a couple seconds or something. And we've talked about this a lot in this era, and the original Dejounte Murray trade from the Spurs fits right into this era of like all of a sudden teams are just throwing caution to the wind with all these picks. I think one of the reasons they're doing that is in this environment where teams are operating this aggressively, where they sense that the league is open at the top, that windows are shorter. And when you have a window, you really got to go for it. Draft picks be damned. And by the way, the new lottery rules make it so our draft picks aren't guaranteed golden tickets anymore, even if we stink. Look at the Pistons, who pick 5th every year, and they stink every year. I think these teams are like, well, if this goes badly, we can get picks back down the line. The difference is they didn't get their own picks back the way the Nets did, but they did get some picks back. I don't know. This is one of those trades where it's like, I have a hard time getting fired up about it for either team. I think it's like, fine. I don't know.
Yeah. No, I think it accomplished two different goals. I think certainly, David Griffin, their president in New Orleans, he came out after they lost in the first round and said, like, I've seen 2 years to this. I'm not rolling the same group back here. And you're thinking, okay, is it Ingram? Is it some other players? And certainly, it's Daniels and Nance from Murray. And I think, where Atlanta was, like, you don't control your picks. You're in salary cap hell. You get a lot of flexibility here. I like Daniels. I think it'll be interesting. Him and the Trae Young fit is probably a little, certainly different than what you get with Murray.
Yeah. So they didn't qualify Sadiq Bey. Doesn't mean he's not going to be back on the team. He's going to be out for most of the season, if not all of it, with an ACL injury.
Just because you don't qualify him now, he's unrestricted. You still got bird rights and everything to bring him back if you wanted to do that. They didn't do it because the qualifying offer would have counted against the apron, and they would have been, had some limited flexibility with that.
I said before the offseason, after the lottery, when they got the number 1 pick, and initially there was this wave of like, well, are they going to go all in to win now? Are they going to try to trade this pick for a veteran who could fit around Trae and Dejounte? And I said, if I were them, I would go the other way, not all the way the other way, but I would split the difference of I'm going to do with this draft pick whatever I want in terms of integrating young talent. I'm either going to use it or I'm going to trade it for 2 picks in the lottery and get a bunch of young players. And on the other hand, then I'm going to trade one of the guards. Whoever gets me the most back, I'm going to trade. Naturally, that's going to get me younger players and future assets. And then I can keep the other guard who can keep us afloat. That's Trae now, who can keep us afloat as like an okay to decent team while we ride out this pick obligation to the Spurs. They've essentially done that so far. And yet, even though that's what I said that they should do or could do, now that they've done it, I'm like, good return for Dejounte. I like it. I think it just feels a little like, so what is this team? Trae's still here. Capella's still here. Hunter's still here. Nance is here. Okongwu's rising.
Ricochet, our first-round pick. We'll see what he is.
It just feels it's in a nice spot, like asset-wise. Are we assuming that they're just keeping Trae now for because they can't tank unless they get their picks back. Like what's and he's only 25. It's not like
I
people
know.
talk about
I
Trey
know.
like he's 29.
I
He's got
know.
to win now. He's only 25. Maybe
I,
that's all this is.
yeah, I mean, I think his number hurts. I think there was probably a better value for Murray at 25 than Trey Young at 44. I think that's what hurts him if they ever wanted to go out and put him out there. So I would anticipate him. I don't unless something stunning happens. I don't think he'll be moved.
They still got Bogdanovich. I forgot about
Yeah,
Bogdanovich, and obviously Jalen Johnson, who's 23,
sure. Who's
is the
rookie
most
extension eligible?
the
Yeah,
most important player on the team. Like if you just eliminate Capella and Bogdanovich, they're still kind of a young team.
sure.
I just it feels like a weird team that's sort of trapped in between life cycles, and maybe that's okay for now because I think they did all right on the Murray deal. I didn't like the deal for the original deal when they made it. I didn't like it for either team that much. I should have liked it more for the Spurs in retrospect. Um, any deal we didn't talk about yet, but they need to find a center, like as we talked about,
Yeah,
and I don't know who that's going to be.
yeah,
I know Portland has 9,000 centers now. I have
yeah.
no idea what the Blazers are doing. You have any idea what the Blazers are doing? Is Jeremy Grant going
Well,
to get traded? Like, what the hell's going on?
I've heard some whispers. I haven't flushed it out though. I mean, I certainly keep an eye on Robert Williams, right? If he's healthy. I mean, he can certainly help a team. It's got to be healthy though.
Any other deals we didn't hit of note anyway?
I don't think so. I think we covered a lot of ground. We still got some free. We got Clay
What do you
still
think?
out there. Miles Bridges.
What?
OG's a number. OG's a big number. It's a big number. That was probably last week.
Yeah, we did. I did that one.
DeRozan's still out there. Tyus Jones is still out there. We'll see. There'll be guys. There are going to be some guys taking some discounts here.
There's one deal I haven't talked about that as long as I have you, I'm going to rope you into
Sure.
talking about for
Oh,
3 minutes.
I know what you're going to talk about. I think I do.
Let's see.
Let's see if I can guess right. Go ahead. The Wizards?
No. What
Oh,
was the Wizards deal?
the Rashawn Holmes.
Turning him into a human trade asset,
That is cor-
a walking trade
because you
chip.
know why that happened? Because they lowered his number. In the new part of the rules this year is that you can acquire players into your non-tax or any of your exceptions. His number originally did not fit into that. So by lowering it, if they ever wanted to trade him, they can fit that into into a team's non-tax mid-level. Some CBA minutia for you.
Sure, Rashawn Holmes is psyched about that. Psyched about that. I mean, I guess that's what the money's for, as Don Draper said. That's what the money's for. No, the deal I was going to ask you about that kind of slid under the radar a little bit. 5 years, $175 million for Emmanuel
Ooh,
Quickley
yeah.
in Toronto. What do we think of that? And what do we think Toronto is building? And I didn't really even talk much about the Scotty
Yeah.
Barnes Max, which I
Yeah.
heard Bill Simmons and Ryan Russillo kind of slamming on their podcast. So we have Quickley, Barrett, Hurdle's still there. Barnes is obviously the centerpiece. They drafted Grady Dick.
Yeah.
What do we make of where Toronto? I don't think Gary Trent is going to go back there. I would bet
No.
against it. What do we
Got
make
Bruce
of
Brown on that. Bruce Brown is the big expiring still.
which they will use in a trade at some point for sure?
Yeah,
You would
it's
think.
the Quickly number I thought was a little rich. Average starting point guards in this league is between 25 and 26. He's probably north of 30 on at least in the first year here.
Mhm.
It's kind of like they don't want to be bad, but they're kind of still trying to figure out kind of who they are. And I think we saw that when they traded Anunoby and they got two players back instead of maybe draft equity,
Well,
right?
not only that, we saw it when they traded one of the picks they got for Siakam for
Yeah,
Olynyk and Ochai Agbaji, which was a
yeah,
strange deal. I like the Davion Mitchell is a nice little acquisition for
yeah,
them. I forgot about him.
yeah, yeah. I mean, so it's like they're kind of that like they're not a 20-win team, but they're like a 34 and 48 team, right? Like that's kind of, and where is it where, that basically you're relying on Barnes, Barrett, quickly, and then parlay one of these two guys, whether it be, certainly Brown into something else.
Um, I think the Raptors would say, well, Quickly is the reason we made that trade. And he's making less per year now than all the guys we traded
Yeah,
or let walk,
yeah,
Anunoby, Van Vliet, and Siakam, who are all in the 40s or ish now. Cool. Like I like Quickly. I think again, as the cap's going to go up, that's going to be not a harmful deal. I like him. I've always liked him. I voted for him 6-man of the year 2 years ago. I think it's fine. Like we'll see how he develops as a playmaker. I think it's fine. The Scotty one is interesting. I was a little surprised how polarizing it was, just because I just can't get fired up anymore over the 25% max.
They don't bother me. The 25% max, like, listen, like LaMelo got one, Darius Garland got one. It's an upside extension.
And
it
I'm
is what,
surprised,
no.
like, it also feels like too many people, I think, have made firm conclusions over exactly what Scotty Barnes is as
Yeah.
a player and what his limitations are.
Yep.
He is how old is he? He's born August 2001, so he's about to turn 23.
Yeah.
He's 22 years old. He's about to turn 23. He's made an all-star team already. His shooting made a little bit of a jump last year. Now he's slumped. He got down to 34% from three. I just like 20 points, 8 rebounds, 6 assists, and the ability, it hasn't quite translated yet, but the ability to be a very good multi-positional defender. I'm not giving up on the idea of Scotty Barnes as like a lead playmaker on a good team, a very good team, maybe someday at age 22, based on what he's shown as a passer, or playmaker, post-up threat. I just think there's still a lot there. And there are holes in his game for sure, as there are for most 22-year-old players. I guess I'm just higher on Scotty Barnes than a lot of people are. I like him as a player. I don't mind. Like, I saw the contract. I was like, oh, that's what happens. Like, these guys this good get the 25% max. I don't, like, what am I going to do? Go into restricted free agency and be a jerk to him?
Wait till like, if like, just throwing out there, like if Evan Mobley ever got a 5-year 225, people go crazy. I'm sure, right?
Yeah. All right, Bobby Marks, we got more work to do. It's 8:38 Pacific time right now. I feel like
the last time I was in this room doing a podcast with you, my friend, a year ago, we had big news. Same spot I'm in.
Dame demanded a trade.
Dame
requested a trade. Ended up going to the Milwaukee Bucks, which I think we actually mentioned as a potential suitor in that wild discussion. This time we got Hartenstein getting paid by the Thunder. Man, watch out for the Thunder. The Thunder are like, it felt like found money. They lose to Dallas, and it's like, oh, all these limitations were laid bare. The Giddey couldn't make shots.
How about they get Isaiah and they get Caruso? I mean, we've talked to Caruso, whatever. And this a team pointed out this to me, and they said they didn't even have to give a pickup for Isaiah.
Yeah, the Sixers
just
waived
a free
him.
agent signing.
Yeah,
just a free agent signing.
I don't understand why Joe and Wiggins. I mean, that's a lot of money for them, I guess. Like, those deals are like, I thought they could get more if they ever made the open market.
Yeah, I mean, Wiggins, I think, because if you didn't do anything, you would have been you're basically paying him now instead of paying him next year, because you would have probably declined. You would have been an unrestricted free agent, and Isaiah, it's a $9 million, probably not, was it 5 for 47, somewhere around there?
That was the reported, yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, that's what you're looking at.
That's Peyton Pritchard money, but Peyton Pritchard, the best half-court shooter in the history of the NBA. Bobby Marks, this may be the last time we podcast before the start of next season, because
unless hell breaks loose.
And look, you know what? I probably just jinxed it. Markkanen's probably going to get traded.
I'll see you later tonight.
I have other people I can go to too, but
I'm here in Bristol, man.
If hell doesn't,
calf eating chicken sandwiches.
If hell doesn't break, I was just there 2 days ago. 3 days ago. It was great. I had a great sandwich. Great wrap. If all hell doesn't break loose and the off season calms down, and then we, summer league, whatever. Thank you for all your time.
Oh,
this
my
year.
pleasure.
We'll do it again whenever we need to do it. But I just like the amount of work you put in 24/7 to help all of us understand the cap, to help enliven all of these podcast TV shows that we have. You're on the touch. You'll be on, I'm sure I'll see you on the touchscreen today on NBA Today's primetime special.
Be on Sports Center in a little while. Yeah.
You don't have to do these things, and you make the podcast a lot better, and your time is very appreciated. And I know you now need to go devote your time to other stuff. So thank you, Mr. Marks.
Thank you for having me on. I actually I was perusing to see where your pod ranks, and when I was on one time, and I saw, I don't know how good those rankings are. Dan can tell us, but I did see it. I did see it ranked higher than the Kelsey brothers there, so that made me feel a little good.
Well, Tay and I, we go way back. All right, Bobby Marks, thank you, sir.
See you, buddy.